If you ask who taught humanity the philosophical aphorism, know thyself first, you get thousands and thousands of answers pointing you to European and Greek philosophers. They also point to the Temple of Delphi, where they say it is etched on stone. In all honesty, who coined the phrase know thyself? Cannot Sultan. Why does it matter? What do you benefit from knowing this? Know thyself was not coined in Greece first. Let's look at this and use the agenda of the timeline, the primary goal, stolen legacy, the true meaning of the phrase know thyself, and also go and summarize all that we shall share today. If you look at the philosophy timeline here given, you'll find that anthropologists and scholars and scientists and researchers tell us that white skin developed in Europe only as recently as 8,000 years ago. You also look at this timeline and you find that they say philosophy began 600 BCE and that civilization began about 6,000 BCE, which gives you a Christian timeline. But some of it and the facts around it supported by anthropology and other studies. What we know is that totemic and melanin dominant human beings were already civilized to the highest point hundreds of years before European ancestors crawled on the earth. Would such an advanced society fail to think philosophically? And if so, would you point to the Greek timeline to find that they coined the term know thyself? The ancient Hamitic historical timeline shows that dark-skinned matrilineal mother goddess kingdoms were already in operation almost 3,000 years before the Greeks. We also know that classical African and indigenous civilizations before Asiatic or European invasion of Africa began almost 200,000 years BCE and came to an end around 330 BCE. So it is imperative, therefore, that black people were the only literate and civilized people in antiquity. Know thyself would have been a phrase that was coined from these civilized people. In the year 1787, upon seeing all of the evidence of the African in antiquity in ancient Hamid, Count Constantine de Volney wrote the following: just think that the race of black men today, our slave and the object of our scorn, is the very race to which we owe our arts, our sciences, and even the use of speech. Which means that all these Greek philosophers studied on the African continent and never discovered even an iota. The phrase know thyself, jitambue mara onwe gi iwe zizive iwe zazi wena titiba ikitse morare is a phrase that was found in Hamid and appropriated by a number of pre-Socratic Greek writers whose thinking was heavily influenced by our ancient civilization, and afterwards, most famously, it was stolen and attributed to their scholars as a stolen legacy. Over 2,000 years, this African concept was borrowed and popularized by writers like Alexander Pope in his well-known essay on Man, 1734, J.J. Rousseau and S.T.G. Coleridge in their works, and it has been under this misapprehension and that the original aphorism and the inscription on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi is not Greek, did not originate there. So when you think that Socrates and all these scholars coined the phrase know thyself, and you believe that, you are believing in a falsity. The proof of stolen legacy is galore. In the book Stolen Legacy, written by George E.M. James, we read that he challenged the idea of the Immaculate Conception of Greek philosophy. And his work is now a classic. Professor James points out that the Greeks did not carry culture or learning or anything to Hamid, but that they found that civilization already there, and they settled there, absorbed it, and studied there. And what you call Greek logic, Greek language, mathematics, or social sciences, including anything else, as historical facts stand, were all stolen from ancient Africa. There are fair-minded European scholars like D. Lubis and Wallis Bash, who say this aphorism, "May know thyself," did not originate in Greece. They know and they write that it was a system of initiation that was applied in Wazoti, so-called Luxor, in the temple. They say the external part of the temple, where the beginners were allowed to enter into the temple, you would find emblazoned on the walls that the temple is the house of the divinity, or the temple is the house of God. And then they say those that were found worthy would then be allowed to go into the inner temple, where again they would meet on the doorway the proverb, "Man, know thyself." But they say it was not the only one, because there were many others. And they say when you know thyself, you are going to know the gods. This was thousands of years before any Greek or any European could ever start to think abstractly. While Socrates, Plato, Aristotle receive credit as great Greek philosophers by millions of male-dominant professors, what must be understood as a great deal of their so-called brilliance came from studying African culture in Hamid and in Kush. Westernized culture and the pale Arabs, as well as pale Indians, who frothed on their mouths, fighting you to believe that Africans made no notable contribution to culture and society. But number one, Greek culture and philosophy and mythology comes from North African spiritual science. Therefore, let us ask, what is the true meaning of know thyself? It is a profound ability to know and answer the big questions. Who is you? Knowing your original nature, the ninefold soul, knowing your conscience and Mahati, knowing if you are fully awake, and overcoming the core delusion. What is this core delusion? The core delusion has a lot to do with the God paradigm. It has also a lot to do with heaven. It has a lot to do with a deity known as the Elder Baoth, commonly called Satan the devil today, as a deceiver of mankind in many spheres of life. So when you read the statement, "The kingdom of heaven is within you, and whosoever shall know himself or herself shall find it," you will find that in the scriptures, in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, it is said the kingdom of God. They changed heaven and used God. Heaven means dimensions, and God is a deity. We have already identified one of the tricksters, a deity that can trick you. We look at a social level and at a race level from a perspective of one of our greatest leaders, Marcus Garvey. He says, if 400 million Africans can only get to know themselves, to know that in them is a sovereign power, is an authority that is absolute, then in the next 24 hours, we would have a new race, we would have a nation, an empire, resurrected not from the will of others to see us rise, but from our own determination to rise irrespective of what the world thinks. What a marvelous, profound thinker this man Marcus Garvey was. In summary, therefore, know thyself, jitambue, mara onwe gi, iwe, rizive, iwe, zazi, wenatitiba, is a claim to our heritage, stolen heritage, now attributed to the Greeks. In your personal capacity and in your personal endeavor, you must reclaim your heritage from cultural thieves and then use that heritage, because it is the key to actualize yourself so that you can transcend yourself so as to be able to unleash your potential in creativity and a full living. The real meaning of Know Thyself is Afro-salvation, a rebirth and a resurrection. Let's look at this from the stolen legacy perspective as taught by Professor George James. He says, salvation in this sense consists of the freedom of the soul from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, which is common to every soul, and which condition must remain until purification or purgation is completed. You can read this from the Stolen Legacy. Greek philosophy is stolen Egyptian philosophy by George G.M. James, the Journal of Pan-African Studies, 2009, e-book, page 43. Therefore, we are here on earth for soul purification, purgation, and completing that, so that we will break the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Know Thyself was never coined in Greece, but it's our stolen legacy. Today is the time to use such a tool to rise up. Amen. If you are interested in more of these aphorisms and teachings, www.madfado.com. Subscribe to our channel, Kamiti Iburu Ethics, and let us walk this journey together. This is Preacher Rabbi Hamaneja Topi, LM Tumizulu Kunikenim Jakancham Skaban, saying Amen.